The crimson light pulsed across 17 different monitoring stations scattered throughout the outer rim, each pulse synchronized to a heartbeat that had been racing for the past 6 hours. In the depths of the Galactic Confederation's primary surveillance facility on Nexa Prime, survey specialist Drath Vek found himself staring at readings that defied every protocol in the manual. His coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. The bitter Cathari brew sat forgotten beside his workstation as streams of data cascaded across his screens. Electromagnetic signatures, gravitational anomalies, quantum fluctuation patterns that painted a picture no one wanted to see. Behind him, the night shift supervisor paced with the nervous energy of someone whose career was about to take a very dark turn. "Run it again," Supervisor Yelmore commanded, her voice tight with the kind of tension that came from watching impossible things become real. All of it, from the beginning. Drath Vek's tentacles moved across the interface with practiced precision, calling up the data streams that had started this nightmare. Sol system, third planet, designation, Earth, classification status, Class 3, primitive, harmless, the kind of backwater world that barely merited a quarterly survey update. At least, that's what it had been yesterday. Initial anomaly detected at 0347 Standard Time, Drath Vek recited, his voice taking on the mechanical cadence of someone who'd repeated the same information so many times it had lost all meaning. Deep space monitors in the Kepler sector registered electromagnetic pulses from the Sol system, frequency patterns. Unusual. Such a mild word for something that was currently turning their understanding of galactic civilization upside down. The data streams painted a story that made no sense. For decades, Earth had been the perfect example of a developing civilization, chaotic radio transmissions, primitive space exploration, technology that posed more danger to themselves than anyone else. Their most advanced spacecraft barely qualified as interplanetary crude chemical rockets that took months to reach their own moon. But 3 days ago, something had changed. The first anomaly had been subtle. A brief electromagnetic pulse in the X-ray spectrum, lasting exactly 0.3 seconds and containing mathematical progressions that suggested artificial origin. The kind of signal that an advanced civilization might use for deep space communication. The second pulse had come 6 hours later, more complex, more deliberate, and absolutely impossible for a species that hadn't even achieved fusion power. By the time the seventh pulse arrived, carrying encrypted data packets that would require quantum computers to decode, everyone in the monitoring station knew they were looking at something that would rewrite the textbooks. "Supervisor," called junior analyst Plexvar from the far side of the control room, his voice carrying the particular note of panic that came from making discoveries you weren't qualified to understand. "We're getting responses." "Responses to what?" "To our monitoring protocols. Earth is answering our scans." The control room fell silent except for the soft hum of processing units struggling to make sense of impossible data. In 40 years of galactic survey work, Drath Vek had never heard of a primitive civilization detecting, much less responding to, Confederation monitoring equipment. Their sensors operated on principles that most species didn't discover until they'd achieved interstellar capability. Earth was supposed to be centuries away from that level of technology. Yelmork moved to Plexvar's station, her expression growing darker with each data point that scrolled across his displays. "Show me." The junior analyst's hands trembled as he called up the response patterns. What they saw defied every assumption about human technological development. Perfectly structured counterscans, designed with an elegant efficiency that spoke of deep understanding of Confederation sensor technology. "They're not just detecting us," Plexvar whispered. "They're studying us back." The implications hit the room like a physical wave. Species didn't develop counter-surveillance technology unless they knew they were being watched. And they certainly didn't develop it to such a sophisticated degree unless they'd been studying their watches for a very long time. How long? Yelmork asked, though she seemed to dread the answer. Flexvar's analysis programs churned through terabytes of historical data, looking for patterns that might have been missed in previous surveys. The results that appeared on his screen made his breathing apparatus wheeze with shock. The subtle anomalies go back decades, he reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Tiny inconsistencies in radio patterns, minute gravitational variations, energy signatures that didn't quite match natural phenomena. We dismissed them as instrument noise, but if I apply the current pattern analysis, his tentacles danced across the interface, reprocessing years of accumulated data through new analytical frameworks. The patterns that emerged were undeniable. They've been hiding from us for at least 50 standard years, maybe longer. Every time our technology improved enough to detect them more clearly, their countermeasures evolved to compensate. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the steady rhythm of life support systems and the distant hum of the station's massive computational cores. Everyone in the room understood what they were looking at. Evidence of a deception so sophisticated, so long-term, that it suggested capabilities far beyond anything in the Confederation's experience. 3 sectors away, in the Xenoarchaeology Department of the Confederation Science Institute, Dr. Gethmore was having a very different kind of revelation. For the past 18 months, he'd been piecing together fragments of the architect civilization, the mysterious species that had vanished from galactic history over 12,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and warnings carved in crystalline matrices. Most scholars considered the architects a cautionary tale about the dangers of rapid expansion. Their empire had grown too fast, consumed too many resources, pushed too hard against the boundaries of known physics. The prevailing theory suggested they'd triggered some kind of cascade failure that erased their civilization in a matter of decades. Gethmore had never believed that theory. The architects had been paranoid, certainly. Their final installations bristled with defensive systems and contained warnings about threats that seemed to exist only in their imagination. But paranoids weren't necessarily wrong. Sometimes the things you feared really were hunting you. Now, sitting in his cluttered office surrounded by fragments of architect technology, Gethmore was beginning to understand what had terrified one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The translation matrix chimed softly as it finished processing the latest batch of crystalline fragments recovered from the architect homeworld. Text appeared on his screen in the flowing script that had taken him years to decipher. Final warning to those who come after. The watchers from the Third Rock are not what they seem. We believed them young, curious, harmless. We were wrong. They are ancient beyond measure, patient beyond understanding. They do not conquer, they guide. They do not destroy, they prune. When the galaxy grows too complex, too interconnected, too dangerous to the fabric of reality itself, they act. We are the 17th. You will not be the last. Beware the sleeping guardians. Beware the ones who hide in plain sight. Beware! The fragment ended there, the crystalline matrix too damaged to yield more text. But the coordinates embedded in the warning were crystal clear. Sol system, 3rd planet, Earth. Gethmore sat back in his chair, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the office's environmental controls. The architects had encountered humanity. And whatever that encounter had been, it had terrified them enough to spend their final years carving warnings in indestructible crystal. His hands moved across the communication interface almost without conscious thought. Priority transmission to the Galactic Survey Division. Classification: urgent. Subject: potential reclassification of Sol 3 civilization. As he composed the message, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The architects hadn't been the first. The warning spoke of 17 previous civilizations, 17 species that had grown too large, too complex, too dangerous. How many galactic empires had risen and fallen while humanity watched from their small blue world, cataloguing weaknesses and waiting for the right moment to act. The transmission sent, Kethmore began pulling up historical records, searching for patterns that might have been overlooked. The Valdris Empire, which had controlled half the galaxy before mysteriously fragmenting into isolated worlds. The Nethys Collective, whose vast hive mind had simply gone silent one day, leaving billions of drones wandering aimlessly through empty cities. The Torgan Republic, the Helix Federation, the Crystal Dynasties, all had reached peaks of power and complexity before experiencing sudden, catastrophic collapse. 17 civilizations, 17 mysterious endings, and through it all, humanity had remained on their little world, primitive and harmless, occasionally sending crude radio signals into space like cosmic children playing with tin cans and string. The pattern was so obvious now that Kethmore wondered how entire generations of historians had missed it. Each fallen civilization had reached a critical threshold, a point where their technology, population, and territorial expansion created instabilities that threatened the fabric of galactic civilization itself. Each had been at the peak of their power when they fell, and each collapse had been followed by a period of galactic rebalancing where smaller civilizations rose to fill the void, developing along more sustainable paths until they too reached the critical threshold. The cycle had been repeating for 50,000 years, but there was one constant throughout all of it: the small blue world in the Sol system, its inhabitants stubbornly remaining at primitive levels of development despite possessing all the resources and intelligence necessary for rapid advancement. Kethmore's analysis programs began correlating his historical research with the current crisis reports flowing in from the monitoring stations. The electromagnetic anomalies, the impossible technology, the sophisticated counter-surveillance systems, it all fit the pattern of a species that had been hiding their true capabilities for millennia. But why reveal themselves now? The answer came to him with terrifying clarity, because the Galactic Confederation had reached the threshold. 300 member species, trade networks spanning half the galaxy, population growth rates that doubled every few centuries, technology that was beginning to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. Humanity was preparing to prune the galaxy again. The priority alert that reached Chief Administrator Zenth Kal's office at 0600 Standard Time contained information that would fundamentally alter the Confederation's understanding of galactic history. The preliminary reports from the monitoring stations were troubling enough, clear evidence that Earth possessed technology far beyond their supposed development level. But Kethmore's archaeological evidence painted a picture that was far more disturbing. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than they appeared. They were gardeners, pruning galactic civilization when it grew too large to sustain itself, and the Confederation had just reached that threshold. Zenth Kal read through the reports 3 times before activating the Classification Review Protocol. In the 3-century history of the Confederation, only 6 species had ever been subjected to full military-grade analysis. 3 had been reclassified as benign after detailed study. 2 had been placed under permanent quarantine. 1 had been dealt with. None of them had ever registered above Class 8 on the threat assessment scale. The review team assembled in the Vorthan system, close enough to Sol for detailed scanning, but far enough away to avoid immediate detection. The survey ship, Inevitable Truth *, represented the pinnacle of Confederation technology. Sensors capable of analyzing molecular structures from light years away, stealth systems that could hide entire fleets from detection, enough firepower to crack planets if negotiations went badly. Team leader Vex Thalan had commanded similar missions before. The process was always the same: approach, scan, analyze, classify. Usually the target species never even knew they'd been examined. Most civilizations that merited classification review were too primitive to detect Confederation technology. Earth, however, was already proving to be an exception. "They know we're here," reported sensor specialist Norgvel, his voice carrying the particular tension of someone whose instruments were telling him impossible things. "We dropped out of hyperspace 47 minutes ago, and they've been tracking us since minute 3. "Impossible," Vexthalan replied automatically. "Our stealth systems are rated for Class 12 civilizations. According to our files, Earth doesn't even qualify for Class 4. "Tell that to whoever's painting us with gravitational resonance scanners," Norgvel muttered, adjusting his sensors for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "These aren't random sweeps either. They know exactly where we are, and they're studying our hull composition." Vexthalan moved to the sensor station, watching the streams of data that showed their supposedly invisible ship being examined by technology that shouldn't exist. Gravitational resonance scanning was a theoretical concept that even Confederation scientists had only begun to explore. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond any civilization that hadn't mastered stellar engineering. "Analysis of the scanning patterns?" she asked. "Professional grade," Norgvel admitted reluctantly. "Whoever's doing this knows our ship class, our probable crew complement, and our weapon systems. They're not just detecting us, they're cataloging our capabilities." The implications were staggering. Earth wasn't just hiding advanced technology, they were actively studying Confederation military assets with systems that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. "Begin deep scan protocols," Vexthalan ordered. "If they want to study us, we'll return the favor." What they found beneath Earth's deceptively primitive surface would haunt their dreams for years to come. The planet was layered in deception so sophisticated it bordered on artistry. Surface scans showed exactly what previous surveys had documented: concrete cities, metal transportation networks, chemical power plants, crude space installations. The kind of infrastructure you'd expect from a species that had barely achieved interplanetary capability. But beneath that surface layer, another world revealed itself. Underground installations that extended for hundreds of kilometers beneath major population centers, connected by transportation networks that operated on principles the Confederation barely understood. Manufacturing facilities hidden in mountain ranges, producing materials that existed only in theoretical physics papers. Power generation systems that drew energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, a technology that Confederation scientists insisted was impossible. And everywhere, defensive systems. Not the crude missiles and energy weapons you'd expect from a primitive civilization, but sophisticated networks of gravitational distortion fields, temporal displacement generators, and reality manipulation devices that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. "How deep does it go?" Vexthalan asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. "We're detecting construction at depths approaching the planetary core," Norgvel reported, his voice hollow with shock. "The engineering required for this. It's beyond anything in Confederation technology. They've essentially hollowed out their entire planet and rebuilt it as a fortress world." But perhaps most disturbing of all were the orbital installations. What Earth's inhabitants called satellites and space stations were revealed to be something far more sinister. Each one was a sensor platform of staggering sophistication, capable of detecting and analyzing targets across multiple star systems. Together, they formed a surveillance network that monitored vast regions of galactic space. Earth wasn't just a hidden fortress world, it was the center of an intelligence operation that had been watching galactic civilization for millennia. "Sensor analysis indicates some of these installations are thousands of years old," Norgvel continued, his voice growing quieter with each revelation. "The humans have been building this network since before the Confederation existed." "Before the Confederation," Vexthalan repeated slowly, the full implications beginning to dawn on her. "They've been watching us from the beginning, watching us develop, expand, grow. And waiting, finished Norgvel. The revelation that Earth had been conducting galactic surveillance for millennia was disturbing enough, but the asterisk inevitable truths, detailed scans, revealed something far more unsettling. The surveillance network was still active, still gathering intelligence, and it was focused specifically on Confederation space. Every major trade route, every military installation, every population center was being monitored by sensors so sophisticated that they could track individual ships across hundreds of light years. The humans knew everything about Confederation capabilities, weaknesses, and strategic resources. They'd been preparing for war. "Get me a direct communication link to Nexar Prime," Vexthalan ordered. "Priority Alpha encryption. The High Council needs to see this immediately." No, but as her communications officer began establishing the connection, every screen on the asterisk inevitable truth asterisk went dark for exactly 3 seconds. When they flickered back to life, a new message was displayed across every interface. "We need to talk." The text was in perfect Confederation standard, using diplomatic protocols that were supposed to be classified at the highest levels. The humans hadn't just been watching, they'd been learning, adapting, preparing. And now they were ready to make contact on their own terms. The message that followed would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. "Representatives of the Galactic Confederation, we are aware of your presence and your mission. We are aware that you have discovered our true nature. We are also aware that your civilization has reached the threshold that requires our intervention. However, this time will be different. This time, we offer you a choice." Vexthalan stared at the message, her mind struggling to process the implications. Threshold, intervention. The archaeological warnings about 17 previous civilizations suddenly took on a terrifying new meaning. "Prepare for incoming transmission," her communications officer announced, his voice tight with anxiety. "Unknown origin, but it's using our own quantum encryption protocols." The figure who appeared on their main display was unmistakably human, middle-aged by their species standards, wearing simple clothing, speaking in calm, measured tones that somehow made the situation even more unsettling. "I am Director Elizabeth Hawthorne of the Terran Oversight Council," she began, her voice carrying an authority that came from wielding power beyond imagination. "For 12,000 years, we have maintained the pretense that we are a primitive civilization developing in isolation. That pretense ends now." She paused, and for a moment, something almost like regret flickered in her eyes. "Your confederation has achieved remarkable stability and prosperity. 3 centuries of peace, unprecedented cooperation between species, technological advancement that has improved the lives of trillions. We have watched your progress with genuine admiration." Vexthalan found herself leaning forward, drawn in despite her growing terror. "Unfortunately," Hawthorne continued, "your civilization has also reached the point where its continued expansion poses an existential threat to galactic stability. Your population growth rates, resource consumption, and territorial expansion follow the same pattern we have observed 17 times before." 17. The number from the architect warnings. "Each time," Hawthorne said, "we have been forced to intervene, sometimes through direct action, sometimes through subtle manipulation of internal conflicts, sometimes through the introduction of catastrophic but survivable challenges that force civilizations to contract and stabilize." The truth hit Vexthalan like a physical blow. The mysterious collapses, the unexplained civil wars, the technological plagues that had periodically swept through galactic history, they hadn't been natural disasters or inevitable consequences of expansion. They had been orchestrated. "However," Hawthorne continued, and for the first time she smiled, "your confederation has shown qualities that previous civilizations lacked. Your ability to integrate multiple species, your commitment to peaceful expansion, your development of sustainable technologies, these suggest that you might be capable of managing your own growth." She leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. Therefore, we are offering you something we have never offered before. Partnership. Accept our guidance, submit to certain limitations on expansion and development, and your civilization will survive and prosper. Refuse, and we will do what we have done 17 times before. The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Inevitable Truth in stunned silence. They had come to study a primitive civilization, and instead discovered that they were facing the most powerful species in galactic history. Worse, they had discovered that their entire civilization existed at the sufferance of beings who had been manipulating galactic development for 50,000 years. The emergency session of the High Council that convened 6 hours later was unlike anything in Confederation history. Representatives from 300 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexar Prime, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate debate. Chancellor Morteth Prime called for order, but it took several minutes for the chaos to subside enough for him to speak. "We face a situation without precedent," he began, his ancient voice carrying across the vast chamber. "The species we have catalogued as primitive humans have revealed themselves to be the most advanced civilization in galactic history. They claim responsibility for the collapse of 17 previous galactic empires, and they have given us an ultimatum." The assembly erupted in fresh chaos. Some delegates called for immediate military mobilization, others demanded negotiation. A few suggested surrender. "What are their specific terms?" asked Ambassador Thelkonis of the Hegemony Worlds, her voice cutting through the noise with practiced diplomacy. Chancellor Morteth Prime activated his holographic display, showing the detailed proposal that had arrived shortly after Director Hawthorne's initial message. The terms were comprehensive and terrifying in their implications. Population growth rates would be limited to sustainable levels. Territorial expansion would be restricted to predetermined boundaries. Certain technologies would be banned or placed under Terran oversight. Military forces would be reduced and monitored. Most critically, all major policy decisions would require approval from the Terran Oversight Council. In exchange, the Confederation would continue to exist. Its member species would retain their cultures, their governments, their way of life, within the boundaries set by humanity. "It's slavery," declared General Corks Valdane of the warrior clans. "They're offering us the choice between submission and extinction." "They're offering us survival," countered Dr. Yeath Mellis of the Science Consortium. "Do any of us really believe we can fight beings who have successfully controlled galactic development for 50,000 years? The debate raged for hours, but gradually a terrifying truth emerged. The humans hadn't just been watching the Confederation develop, they had been guiding it. Trade routes that seemed naturally efficient had been subtly optimized over centuries. Diplomatic solutions to seemingly intractable conflicts had been quietly suggested by advisors, whose origins no one had questioned. Scientific breakthroughs that had propelled civilizations forward had been inspired by anonymous research that appeared at precisely the right moments. The Confederation hadn't achieved its unprecedented success through their own efforts. They had been carefully nurtured by beings who understood galactic civilization better than they understood themselves. And now their gardeners were preparing to prune them. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. 847 species in favor of accepting Terran guidance, 654 opposed. The narrow margin reflected the terrible nature of the choice: submission to alien overlords or the potential extinction of galactic civilization. But even as the Confederation prepared to formally accept humanity's terms, disturbing reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. Military installations were experiencing systematic equipment failures. Communication networks were suffering mysterious disruptions. Transport hubs were shutting down without explanation. It was a demonstration of power that made the choice academic. Humanity could shut down Confederation civilization whenever they chose. The vote had been a courtesy, not a negotiation. The formal ceremony that established the Terran Oversight Council's authority over the Galactic Confederation took place in the same assembly hall where the emergency session had been held. Director Hawthorne attended personally, along with a dozen other humans who introduced themselves as regional coordinators for different sectors of the galaxy. "You have made a wise choice," Hawthorne addressed the assembled delegates. "We understand that accepting our guidance represents a fundamental change in your civilization's trajectory. But we want you to understand that our goal is not domination. It is sustainability." She activated a holographic display that showed galactic development over the past 50,000 years. The pattern was clear: cycles of expansion, complexity, and collapse, each cycle preceded by warning signs that the current Confederation was already showing. Each civilization that reached this level of complexity faced the same choice you face now, she explained. Most refused our guidance, believing they could manage their own growth. All of them were wrong. The display showed the end results. Planets stripped of resources, populations collapsed to a fraction of their peak, technology lost, knowledge forgotten. But in each case, the species themselves survived, rebuilding more sustainable civilizations over the course of millennia. "Those who accepted our guidance thrived within sustainable boundaries," Hawthorne continued. "They developed rich cultures, advanced sciences, fulfilling lives. The only difference was that they grew slowly, carefully, within limits that ensured their long-term survival." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "Your confederation will be the 18th civilization to reach this threshold. You have chosen to become the first to accept our guidance voluntarily. We hope this decision will serve as a model for future civilizations." Future civilization. The words carried chilling implications. Humanity was thinking in timescales that spanned geological epochs, planning for galactic development across millions of years. The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Terran Accord, a document that formally established humanity's authority over Confederation development. Each species representative signed individually, their gestures recorded for posterity, but as the delegates filed out of the assembly hall, many wondered what they had really agreed to. Had they saved their civilization, or had they simply chosen a more comfortable form of extinction? The answer came in the months that followed. Under Terran guidance, the Confederation began a careful process of reorganization. Population growth was managed through incentive programs rather than force. Territorial expansion was redirected toward sustainable development of existing worlds rather than conquest of new ones. Military forces were restructured for peacekeeping rather than warfare. Most surprisingly, technological development accelerated in areas that promoted sustainability, while being restricted in areas that posed long-term risks. Confederation scientists found themselves working alongside human advisors whose knowledge seemed to span fields that hadn't even been discovered yet. "They're not just advanced," reported Dr. Yeath Melas after his first joint research project. "They understand the fundamental principles underlying reality itself. The technologies they're sharing with us are beyond anything we imagined possible." But perhaps the most unsettling discovery came from historians who began studying the Confederation's own development under Terran guidance. The evidence was subtle, but undeniable. Humanity had been influencing their civilization since its very beginning. The first contact between species that led to the Confederation's founding, the technological breakthroughs that made interstellar travel practical, the diplomatic innovations that allowed hundreds of species to coexist peacefully, the economic systems that enabled unprecedented prosperity. All of it had been guided by human agents working behind the scenes, subtly nudging galactic civilization towards stability and sustainability. The Confederation hadn't developed naturally, it had been designed. "We are not your conquerors. Director Hawthorne explained to a small group of senior officials who had been briefed on the full scope of human involvement in galactic history. "We are your gardeners. For 50,000 years, we have been cultivating galactic civilization, guiding its development toward forms that can survive and prosper over the long term." She activated another holographic display, this one showing the galaxy as it existed in the present day. Thousands of civilizations thrived across the spiral arms, most of them completely unaware of the forces that shaped their development. Every species you consider primitive is being carefully monitored and occasionally guided. When they reach critical thresholds in their development, we intervene, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly. Most never realize they are being managed. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just controlling the Confederation, they were managing the entire galaxy, orchestrating the rise and fall of civilizations across cosmic timescales. "How many of you are there?" asked Chancellor Mortith Prime, his voice barely above a whisper. Hawthorne smiled, and for the first time her expression seemed genuinely warm. "That's the wrong question, Chancellor. You're thinking in terms of the 8 billion humans who live on Earth. But we haven't been confined to a single world for 50,000 years. The truth she revealed would haunt the Confederation's leadership forever. Humanity had spread throughout the galaxy millennia ago, establishing hidden colonies on thousands of worlds. They lived among other species, worked in their governments and institutions, guided their development from within. Most of the alien advisors who had helped shape Confederation policy over the centuries had been human agents, the brilliant scientists whose research had advanced galactic technology, the wise diplomats who had resolved seemingly impossible conflicts, the visionary leaders who had guided species toward peaceful cooperation. They had all been part of humanity's vast network of gardeners, tending the galaxy with patience that spanned geological ages. "We are everywhere," Hawthorne concluded. "We have been among you from the beginning, watching, learning, guiding. The galaxy you know, the civilization you've built, the peace you've enjoyed, all of it exists because we have been protecting it from the forces that would otherwise tear it apart." The final revelation came during a private meeting between Director Hawthorne and the Inner Council. Away from the formal ceremonies and public declarations, she shared the truth that would define the Confederation's future. "Your species are not the first to discover our nature," she began, her voice carrying the weight of eons. "Others have learned our secret, attempted to resist our guidance, tried to expose us to their civilizations." She paused, her expression growing distant. "They always fail, not because we destroy them, but because the truth is too terrible for most civilizations to accept. The knowledge that your entire existence has been managed by alien gardeners tends to cause psychological and social collapse." The Inner Council sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Learning the truth about humanity was itself a threat to civilization stability. "That's why we maintain the pretense of primitive development on Earth," Hawthorne continued. "It's not just to avoid detection. It's to provide a focal point for those who discover our true nature. You can rage against the primitives hiding on one world, but the truth that we are everywhere, that we have always been here, that galactic civilization exists only because we allow it, that truth would break your society." She leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "The choice you made in the assembly was not just about accepting our guidance. It was about accepting reality itself. The galaxy has been managed for 50,000 years. It will continue to be managed for the next 50,000. The only question is whether you acknowledge that truth and work with it, or deny it and suffer the consequences." Chancellor Mortith Prime found his voice at last. "What happens to civilizations that discover the truth but refuse to accept it?" Hawthorne's answer was delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing routine administrative matters. They tend to become unstable. Internal conflicts arise as different factions debate whether to resist or surrender. Some groups attempt to develop technologies that could threaten our operations. Others try to warn other civilizations about our existence. She shrugged. Such civilizations rarely last more than a few centuries before fragmenting into smaller, more manageable units. We don't need to destroy them. The truth destroys them for us. The meeting ended with a question that would haunt the inner council for years to come. As Hawthorne prepared to leave, Chancellor Morteth Prime asked, "Director, in 50,000 years of galactic management, has any civilization ever successfully resisted your guidance?" Hawthorne paused at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Define resistance, Chancellor." "You could argue that we are the resistance, the last survivors of a civilization that grew too large, too complex, too dangerous to survive. We learned to hide, to adapt, to guide rather than conquer." She turned to face them one final time. "The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but it is also fragile. Left to their own devices, intelligent species invariably consume their resources, expand beyond sustainable limits, and collapse into chaos. We prevent that collapse by managing growth, guiding development, pruning civilizations when necessary." Her voice softened. "We are not your enemies. We are the immune system that keeps the galaxy alive." In the months that followed the Terran Accord, as the Confederation began its careful transition to guided development, subtle changes rippled throughout galactic civilization. Trade routes became more efficient, resource allocation improved, international conflicts decreased. Population growth stabilized. To most citizens of the Confederation, these changes seemed like natural improvements. Only the highest levels of government knew the truth, that their civilization was being optimized by beings who understood galactic ecology better than they understood themselves. But perhaps the most profound change was psychological. Those who knew humanity's true nature found themselves looking at the galaxy differently. Every successful colony, every peaceful negotiation, every technological breakthrough carried the shadow of human influence. Had their ancestors achieved these successes on their own, or had they been guided by invisible hands? The question would never be fully answered because the truth was too complex for simple explanations. Humanity guided galactic development, but they didn't control every detail. They created conditions for success, but they didn't guarantee it. They prevented catastrophic failures, but they allowed smaller mistakes that taught valuable lessons. They were gardeners, not puppeteers. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source: Earth itself. As part of the new partnership, select Confederation scientists were invited to visit humanity's homeworld for the first time in galactic history. What they found there was both more and less than they expected. Earth was indeed a fortress world, honeycombed with installations and technologies beyond Confederation understanding. But it was also a museum, a carefully preserved monument to humanity's true history. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in archives that stretched for thousands of kilometers, they found the records of humanity's original civilization. The species that had once spanned the galaxy reached for the stars, pushed the boundaries of known physics until they nearly broke the universe itself, and the records of what that ambition had cost them. "We were not gardeners originally," Director Hawthorne explained as she guided a group of Confederation scientists through the archives. "We were explorers, conquerors, builders of wonders that defied imagination. We built ring worlds around stars, created artificial galaxies, manipulated time itself." The holographic displays showed the scope of humanity's original empire: millions of worlds, technologies that treated the laws of physics as suggestions, population numbers that boggled the mind. "We reached the same threshold that your Confederation has reached," she continued, "the point where expansion becomes unsustainable, where complexity becomes chaos, where ambition becomes catastrophe." The displays showed the end result: Stars going nova from overuse, space-time itself beginning to fray under the strain of impossible technologies, reality starting to unravel at the quantum level. We had a choice: scale back our civilization or watch the universe itself collapse. Most of our people chose to die with their achievements rather than accept limits. Arson. The final displays showed humanity's great retreat, the abandonment of technologies that threatened reality, the voluntary reduction of population, the deliberate choice to appear primitive while rebuilding their civilization along sustainable lines. The few of us who survived became gardeners out of necessity, Hawthorne concluded. We learned that intelligence without wisdom leads to extinction, that growth without limits leads to collapse, that the greatest achievement is not reaching for the stars, but learning to live among them without destroying them. The Confederation scientists who witnessed these revelations returned to their worlds with a new understanding of humanity's role in galactic history. They were not conquerors or overlords, but survivors of their own success, beings who had learned the hardest lesson in the universe, that unlimited growth in a finite cosmos leads inevitably to collapse. But even this revelation paled beside the final truth that emerged from the deepest archives. There is something else you need to understand, Hawthorne said, as she led the group to a sealed section of the archives that required her personal authorization to access. Something we have never shared with any other species, because the knowledge itself is dangerous. The chamber they entered was different from the others. Smaller, more somber, filled with displays that showed not the glory of ancient human civilization, but its darkest moments. Images of stars dying before their time, of galaxies where the fundamental constants of physics had been altered beyond recognition, of regions of space where reality itself had become unstable. We were not the first species to reach the threshold of cosmic engineering, Hawthorne explained, her voice heavy with the weight of eons. Before us, there were others, species so ancient that their names are lost to time, civilizations that achieved godlike power over matter and energy. The displays showed evidence of these predecessor civilizations, structures that dwarfed solar systems, technologies that had reshaped entire galactic clusters, achievements that made even ancient humanity's empire seem primitive by comparison. They all made the same mistake we made, Hawthorne continued. They believed that intelligence justified unlimited expansion, that consciousness gave them the right to reshape the universe according to their desires. What happened to them? Asked Dr. Ythmelis, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. They broke reality itself, Hawthorne replied simply. Each species pushed further than the last, developed technologies that went beyond manipulating matter and energy to altering the fundamental structure of existence. They created universes within universes, reshaped time, played with forces that should have been left untouched. The final displays showed the consequences, regions of space where the laws of physics had become chaotic, where cause and effect had been severed, where the very concept of existence had been rendered meaningless. The universe is still healing from their experiments, Hawthorne said. Dark matter, dark energy, quantum uncertainty, these aren't natural phenomena. They're scar tissue, the universe's attempt to repair damage done by species that thought they were gods. The implications were staggering. The fundamental mysteries of cosmology, the things that Confederation science had spent millennia trying to understand, were actually evidence of cosmic trauma inflicted by civilizations so advanced they had accidentally broken reality. How many? Dr. Ythmelis asked. How many species reached that level? We don't know, Hawthorne admitted. The evidence suggests at least 7, possibly more. Each one left scars on the fabric of space-time that we're still discovering. She turned to face the group, her expression grave. Humanity survived our brush with cosmic engineering because we recognized the danger in time to pull back. We chose to become gardeners rather than gods. But the temptation is always there, the belief that intelligence justifies unlimited power, that consciousness grants the right to reshape existence itself. Is that why you manage galactic civilizations? Asked another scientist. To prevent them from making the same mistake? Partly, Hawthorne nodded. But there's another reason, one that makes our work even more urgent. She activated a final display, this one showing the galaxy as it existed in the present day, but with overlays that revealed hidden structures, energy patterns that were invisible to conventional sensors. The damage done by the ancient civilizations is still spreading, she explained. Reality has weak points, places where the fundamental constants are unstable, where the barriers between dimensions are thin. These weak points are expanding, slowly but inevitably. The display showed the progression over cosmic timescales, areas of instability growing larger, connecting with each other, creating cascading failures in the fabric of existence itself. At current rates of expansion, the damage will reach critical mass in approximately 12 million years, Hawthorne continued. When that happens, the universe as we know it will cease to exist. The silence that followed this revelation was profound. The scientists found themselves contemplating not just the end of their civilizations, but the end of existence itself. However, Hawthorne added, and for the first time in their conversation, she seemed almost hopeful, we believe the process can be reversed. The scars can be healed, the weak points stabilized, reality itself restored to its original state. How? Dr. Yithmelis asked. By managing galactic development on a cosmic scale, she replied. By ensuring that no species ever again reaches the level of power that could inflict further damage. By gradually reducing the technological complexity of galactic civilization until it reaches levels that don't stress the fabric of space-time. The true scope of humanity's mission was finally revealed. They weren't just managing individual civilizations. They were orchestrating the gradual reduction of cosmic complexity, slowly and carefully, bringing the universe back from the brink of total collapse. The galaxy you know, with its hundreds of species and thousands of worlds, represents the maximum level of complexity that current reality can safely sustain, Hawthorne explained. Any significant increase in population, technology, or territorial expansion risks triggering cascade failures that could accelerate the universe's collapse. She paused, her expression growing more serious. That's why civilizations that grow beyond certain thresholds must be pruned. It's not cruelty, it's cosmic necessity. Every species we've guided to sustainable levels is another step toward healing the universe itself. The scientists who returned from Earth carried with them knowledge that would reshape their understanding of existence itself. They had learned that their civilizations were part of a cosmic healing process, that their lives had meaning beyond their individual achievements, that they were participants in the universe's struggle to repair itself. But they also carried the burden of terrible knowledge, that existence itself was fragile, that consciousness had a responsibility that extended beyond species or even galactic boundaries, that the price of cosmic stability was the acceptance of limits that many would find unbearable. The final revelation came not from humanity, but from the Confederation's own deepest thinkers as they processed the implications of what they had learned. If humanity was managing galactic civilization to heal cosmic damage, and if that damage was caused by species that had achieved godlike power, then the question arose, what was managing humanity itself? The answer came during a private conversation between Chancellor Morteth Prime and Director Hawthorne, months after the formal establishment of the Terran Accord. "Director," the Chancellor said carefully, "your people have accepted the responsibility of managing galactic civilization for the greater good. But who manages the managers? Who ensures that humanity itself doesn't eventually exceed safe limits?" Hawthorne's response was delivered with the same calm efficiency that characterized all her communications. But there was something different in her expression, a flicker of something that might have been fear. An excellent question, Chancellor. The truth is, we don't know if we're being managed by something even more advanced than ourselves. The evidence suggests possibilities. She activated a holographic display that showed deep space phenomena that Confederation science had catalogued but never understood. Gamma-ray bursts that followed mathematical patterns. Cosmic microwave background radiation that contained what appeared to be information structures. Galactic rotation curves that suggested invisible intelligence. There are forces at work in the universe that we don't understand, she admitted. Phenomena that suggest intelligence operating on scales we can barely comprehend. Whether these represent natural processes or the activities of beings even more ancient than humanity, we simply don't know. The possibility that humanity itself was being managed by entities that operated on cosmic scales was both terrifying and oddly comforting. It suggested that the universe had built-in safeguards against the kind of damage that had nearly destroyed reality, that consciousness itself might be part of a larger pattern of cosmic healing. But it also raised questions that had no answers. If humanity was being guided by cosmic forces, did free will exist at any level? Were all conscious beings simply components in some vast universal healing process, their individual choices and achievements ultimately meaningless in the face of cosmic necessity? Does it matter, Hawthorne asked when the Chancellor voiced these concerns, whether we're acting from our own initiative or following the guidance of beings we can't perceive? The work remains the same. The universe needs healing. Consciousness appears to be the tool by which that healing occurs. Our role is to be the best gardeners we can be, regardless of who might be tending the garden we exist in. In the years that followed the Terran Accord, as the Confederation adapted to its new role as a consciously managed civilization, these philosophical questions would continue to resonate throughout galactic society. But gradually, a new understanding emerged, one that found meaning not in independence, but in participation in something larger than any individual species could comprehend. The galaxy became quieter under human guidance, but not emptier. Civilizations developed along more sustainable paths, focusing on depth rather than breadth, quality rather than quantity. Art flourished as species discovered that limits could inspire rather than constrain creativity. Science advanced in directions that enhanced understanding without threatening stability. Most importantly, the knowledge that existence itself was fragile gave new meaning to life. Every world that thrived, every species that found happiness within sustainable boundaries, every individual who lived a fulfilling life was a victory against the forces that had once threatened to unravel reality itself. The Confederation had become gardeners too, tending their own small section of the cosmic healing process under the guidance of beings who had learned the hardest lessons in universal history. And somewhere in the depths of space, in monitoring stations hidden among the stars, human sensors continued their eternal vigil, watching for signs of instability, ready to act when civilizations approached the thresholds that could not be crossed, maintaining the delicate balance that kept existence itself intact. They had been watching for 50,000 years. They would watch for 50,000 more, or for however long it took to heal a universe wounded by the ambitions of gods who had forgotten the meaning of wisdom. The Class 15 warning had never been about humanity's threat to galactic civilization. It had been the universe's acknowledgement that the gardeners had finally revealed themselves.